So tell us, what does 27 feel like?
Exactly. I'll keep it a secret.
All right. I'm John Roberts. Joyous celebration for Catholics gathered at the Vatican and around the world as Pope Leo made his first appearance to address the crowd from the balcony overlooking St. Peter's Square. Here is a taste of what folks are saying about the first American Pope.
Who would have thought that in our lifetime we would see a North American Holy Father?
The fact that he's American but is wonderful, but the fact that he is the type of person that he is, that he has a missionary spirit, a missionary heart.
I think that will spread a strong message of good throughout North America and beyond.
I think it's time for a U.S. Pope. I think it's time for him to bring a new perspective to the Vatican. So we're excited. I think it's going to be great for the Catholics.
And that news conference by American Cardinals in Rome set to get underway any minute. But until then, let's bring in Fox News contributor Jonathan Morris, who has had some time to reflect and think about all that has happened in less than 24 hours ago when we found out this news. Jonathan, good morning.
Thank you, Dana. Copy.
Jonathan, go ahead. Give us your reflections this morning as we wait for this news conference.
Oh, my gosh, yes. Yes, so listen. Anyone who thinks this is Francis II, I think is in for a real surprise. I've looked at his history both before the conclave and now after. What I can tell you is that he's an intellectual. He's a pragmatist. He's a great administrator, manager. He has high respect from his Augustinian brothers who elected him to lead the entire Augustinian global body, but also by Pope Francis. Pope Francis found in him a man of the people who loves and cares for people, humble, almost timid, but at the same time with a clarity and a nuance, intellectual rigor that we did not find in Pope Francis's public statements. And I think conservatives worldwide can say this might be the one to bring us the tradition with the spirit of Francis that people from the outside, unchurched, so loved about him.
Jonathan, it's John Roberts here along with Dana. The fact that he took the name Leo following on Leo XIII, who I guess at the turn of the turn of the previous century before that, really brought the Catholic Church into the modern world, that maybe he's taking some cues from that, and the idea that Leo XIII really was sort of a middle-of-the-road pope, so he's not going to go too far in either direction. What do you think about the fact that he wants to be the successor to some degree to Leo XIII?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Leo XIII is loved, actually, by both progressives and conservatives. And now they don't know what to do. Hold on. Is he ours or not? That's what a lot of people are saying. But let me tell you, let's just put an example. Immigration. We saw that he criticized before he became Pope J.D. Vance's take on immigration. But let me tell you, it's going to be very different than what Pope Francis did. And here's why. Instead of saying something like, welcome the immigrant, and leaving it at that, which allowed the left really to have the moral high ground on almost everything, what this Pope is going to do, in my opinion, based on his history, is saying, this is what it means to take care of the immigrant. Because that's actually just a teaching of Jesus, of welcome the foreigner. But the social doctrine of the church that Leo XIII taught, really laid a foundation for, also said that with every right, like the right to leave your own country, there are obligations and responsibilities, like respecting the law. And that's the type of nuance we're going to get from this Pope.
Jonathan, thank you. We also have Benjamin Hall joining us. Thank you so much for being here. And can you give us what your feel is about reaction from maybe there in Rome about an American being named as Pope?
Well, I can tell you it certainly wasn't something that many people expected. Particularly here in Rome, I think many people felt that it would be Italian, and if you looked at the odds that all the newspapers here had given, the top 3 candidates were all Italian, so I imagine a few people here are a bit surprised by that. But I think that they have picked a pope who bridges so many different divides. You know, there's a long conversation about whether Pope Francis was more of a progressive pope. We've already seen signs from Pope Leo XIV that he is going to be a little bit more traditional. Just look at the clothes that he wore on the balcony yesterday. It was a far more formal cloak that Benedict wore, that John Paul II wore. That is harking back to the more traditional era. The Mass that he gave today, he gave in Latin, and that was something that Pope Francis had moved away from. So again, another sign for the Conservatives, although he was made a cardinal by Pope Francis, that he is going to be pulling back. And of course, one of the big questions also is how his American identity will play into this. And I think that he is a cardinal, or pope rather, who is going to bridge both being an American from such a wealthy, powerful country, but also a pope who has spent much of his life outside America. He has become a citizen of Peru. And he talked in his homily today about trying to bridge these differences, both about trying to bring together different parts of the world. So I think that he is someone who's planning on doing just that. And one thing was very interesting this morning when he gave his homily. He was quite forceful about people who had moved away from their religion. And one quote that he said was this. He said, "Even today, there are many settings in which the Christian faith is considered absurd, meant for the weak and unintelligent. Settings where other securities are preferred, like technology, money, success, power, or pleasure." And whereas Pope Francis focused his papacy on the developing world, poor world, perhaps, and Jonathan and I have been talking about this, perhaps he is going to focus on the Western world and the decline in some religion there and how the youth are turning away. So that could be a big difference from Pope Leo XIV.
Jonathan, you mentioned a moment ago that he has his own views on the Trump administration immigration policy. He's also got his own views on this idea of teaching gender ideology. The government, when he was the Bishop of Chiclayo, the government of Peru wanted to implement gender teachings in schools. Here's what he told local media, according to the New York Times: "The promotion of gender ideology is confusing because it seeks to create genders that don't exist." So while his immigration policy may lead more toward the progressive, his views on gender ideology would seem to lean more conservative.
Well, I'm glad the New York Times had the honesty to print that, because do not label this man yet. And I think it's going to be hard to label him even 5 years from now, because he has intellectual rigor with a kindness and a humility that also attracts. Intellectual rigor is a powerful thing because it allows us to examine both policy and principle. And gosh, don't we think we might need that in today's world?
All right, stand by, gentlemen, because we want to go to this news conference now with the American Cardinals. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York is speaking right now. Let's listen.
Unity, hope, and promise. You were there in the square yesterday. Just the electricity. Nobody does drama like the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And all over, so I get a text from Charlie, my great-nephew, who was born the day Pope Francis was elected. Uncle Tim, we're all watching the white smoke. We're all cheering Pope Leo, and we're all crying. And please, we're glad you weren't Pope, so am I. So you can come back home. There's that enthusiasm from the mouth of a 12-year-old. Secondly, though, I would agree with Cardinal Bernardo. The fact that he was born in the United States of America, boy, that's a sense of pride and gratitude for us. I think he's a Peruvian citizen. I think during his missionary years in Peru, he so fell in love with the people. I think he was there 3 decades. Cardinal Tobin, and so he became a Peruvian citizen. He's a citizen of the world. He reminds us that we all have our true citizenship in heaven, as St. Paul taught us, and that is his role as universal pastor. Where he comes from is sort of now a thing of the past. You know, Robert Francis Prevost is no longer around. It's now Pope Leo. That's why Jesus changed the name of the first pope, right? You're no longer Simon. Your name is Peter. So he's a new person. He's our Holy Father. He's the successor of Peter. He's the father of the Church Universal. Where he came from, secondary.
Well, this is my first conclave and my first press conference after a conclave, and I think it's always great to bat third in the order because they put the really fast guys out in front of you. I still have a moment to prepare, and I guess my first experience in the conclave was its starkness. You know, it's a meeting that's a lot more than a meeting that's coming. It happens after a period of mourning, which I don't think is really finished yet. But, you know, a period of mourning And things that were part of our lives, any device that could transmit was taken from us. Any connection with the wider world. Now we had that for a few weeks when we listened to each other talk about what each cardinal present, and not only the voting cardinals, but any cardinal that could still get into the meeting room, talked about for the weeks before the conclave. What does the church need? What's the world need? What are we hoping for? What are we dreaming about? So a starkness followed by expectation. Now we know something's going to happen eventually. And in some ways the voting is like watching a glacier move, but sometimes glaciers under stress move a lot faster. I really think that we were not simply counting on the forces that were within that room. We were remembering that it's the Holy Spirit who brings the church together. And it's the Holy Spirit who makes reconciliation possible. And it's the Holy Spirit who calls for it and indicates. And so we just needed to be sensitive to that. And then I saw that kind of reflected in the former Cardinal Bob Prevost, who I've known for about 30 years, worked with him. And after one of the ballots, you carry your ballot to the front of the hall and you deposit it and say a few words aloud and say, I'm standing before God. And Michelangelo reminds you of our ultimate destiny. And as best as I can say, this is the one that I think is indicated. Then I went back and I took a look at Bob, and because his name had been floating around, and he had his head in his hands, and I was praying for him because I couldn't imagine what happens to a human being when you're facing something like that. And then when he accepted it, it was like he was made for it. He just, all of whatever anguish was resolved by feeling that I think that this wasn't simply his saying yes to a proposal, but God had made something clear and he agreed with it. So it was kind of an interesting few days.
Well, I've been in cleanup, and I hope this is my first conclave, and I hope my last. So viva el Papa. But one of the things that I come away with is, just imagine, we were over 130 people with different languages, cultures, backgrounds, from more than 70 countries. And within 24 hours, we were able to come to unity in making a decision. I hope that's a signal to the world that we can reach across our differences in culture, language, country, nationality, and work together to solve the problems that are there. That we have the opportunity to reconcile and have peace. And I think it's instructive that Pope Leo began his message to people in the square by offering them the peace of Christ. So I saw this as really a spiritual experience of not only going through the motions of praying for the Holy Spirit, singing the Veni Creator, but actually having an experience of how we were able to treat each other with great respect, to listen to each other during the congregations beforehand, and then when it came time for voting, things seemed to just gel and go in a direction that set us on a path of unity. And that's what I really come away with from this experience. If only the rest of us in our lives and in the world could have that that mad dash to unity that we seem to have in the conclave.
This was one of the most prayerful moments in my life. My first conclave, and